Hey gang, before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to remind you of a couple of things. Number one, Challenger Fest is right around the corner. It's an awesome time. Be sure to check it out if you haven't already. The website is challengerfest.net, and I will leave a link in the description. We're gonna have some drag racing, a big car show, and all of that. It's our 12th year. It's a really good time. If you enjoy these cars, you need to come on out. The second thing is, one of our sponsors, Martin Dodge, is there in Bowling Green, Kentucky. They've sponsored Challenger Fest for the past few years. They are offering a special if you mention this YouTube channel, the Speedy's Garage YouTube channel. They're gonna give you true dealer cost on your car if you purchase it from them, and that's a in-stock vehicle on the lot, or if you happen to order one, same deal. They're gonna offer you the first 10,000 miles, you get free oil changes and tire rotations as part of that purchase, and they're gonna cover your Challenger Fest entry as well. If you're not local, they can ship the car and handle that remote delivery, no problem. I've had a couple of folks reach out to me that have taken advantage of this already, and they said the experience has been very positive. Again, that's Martin Dodge in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I'll leave a link to them as well in the description. And with that, let's get on to today's video. Speedy's Garage gang, welcome back to the Speedy's Garage YouTube channel. This week we're on yet another field trip, and it feels good to be out and about. We're gonna make some changes for this year's racing season, and I'm gonna go into some technical information, so if you like that kind of stuff, you wanna stick around and see what it is we're gonna do. Part of it comes down to that engine failure that I had a couple of years ago, and I'll link to that to the top if you missed it. We lost cylinder 7 in the original Hellcat motor, and we had several theories on why it happened. You know, I boxed that thing up and shipped it back to Mopar and let them have it back as a core charge for the Demon, Red Eye, what are you going to call it, engine that we got to put back in Go Man Go. And that engine has been flawless. It's supposed to be stronger than the original Hellcat motor. It seems to be. It's done great. I haven't had any issues with it at all. Doesn't use any oil. Runs strong. If you've been paying attention, you see we ran some really good times lately. As you saw, it ran a 970 recently at the track, so very, very happy with that. Some of the guys on the forum, on hellcatforum.org, have started rebuilding engines, and one very sharp gentleman has disassembled his motor, and he took a bunch of measurements. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but what he found were the ring end gaps, and I'll show you a piston here and talk about that a little bit so you understand what those are. So this is a Hellcat piston out of a failed Hellcat motor. This one, I think, actually, I don't know if you can see that, actually bent the rod, and I kind of kept it as a souvenir. This is not from my engine. This is from one that the folks over at OST Dyno sent to me as a paperweight, as a souvenir. I wanted one to have. But this is a good way for me to illustrate what it is I'm trying to talk about. As you can see, these rings that go on this piston, and they're what seal it in the cylinder. They're what seal everything up. They help with your blow-by. They help with oil control and several other things. I'm not an engine builder, so I'm not going to try to tell you exactly what each ring does. But what you can see easily is there's a gap. You see that? So to measure that appropriately, you really need to put it in a cylinder for this engine, and then you would use a feeler gauge to see what that gap is, and it's tiny. It's measured in the thousandths. So you can imagine, as that heats up, if that gap isn't just right, or if it gets too hot and those touch, that's a pretty thick piece of metal there. Where's that all gonna go? If it starts to butt end on end, and now it's gonna start bending or doing something weird, getting a wave in it, and that's where you start seeing the top of the piston snap off, or what we found with the Hellcat pistons, that some folks have disassembled their own Hellcat motors and taken measurements and looked in engine building books, is the top ring actually has a larger gap than the second ring. So usually when I see a failure of a boosted motor, it's because the top ring gets hot, it's closest to the heat, right? It gets hot, the ends touch, all that stress goes somewhere, it pushes up, and it'll find the weak spot in this top ring land, and it will snap that off. In this case, the second ring is actually tighter than the top ring. So the top ring's still okay. It's not touching enough, or not touching at all, and not bending up and starting to try to snap the top of the piston off. But the second ring is now seizing up, and it's touching, and so it's trying to go somewhere, and it starts to flex out, and what can happen is it'll start to seize in the cylinder. And that may have been what happened to mine, it may have been what happened to this one, I have no idea, but when you start having friction and all of that, and you got those RPMs, you're turning, 65, 6,400 RPM, that's a lot of heat that's getting generated. So my thought is, if I can cool this down, the cooler I can keep this in the combustion chamber, the better off things are gonna be and the happier things are gonna be, so that's what we're gonna try to do. And that is also why when you have an engine built, they'll usually ask you what you're gonna use it for. It's gonna have nitrous, it's gonna have boost, how much boost, and they will actually file those rings to set the gap for your specific application. The old engine we had built by Arrington for Orange Crush, it had in the engine build specs, it had the ring end gaps of what they use for the first ring and the second ring. And so they'll set those up so that they can take that extra heat and actually won't touch. The problem with an OEM is these rings have a lot to do with emissions, and so they have to stay within a certain spec to meet emissions, and apparently on the Hellcat motors they had to have that second ring pretty tight because it's close, and I think that's probably what's getting some of those Hellcat motors. I don't know if 100% for sure if that's what happened to my engine, but something caused cylinder 7 to get unhappy, and if it was heat related, and it seems like several of these Hellcat motors have had problems with cylinder 7, maybe something to do with the cooling or the fueling or the oiling, and that cylinder tends to get hot first. Well, there you go, you end up having that problem. As a result of that, I've decided to start making a couple of changes for this year to try to help that not be such an issue, and that's why we're on a field trip today. It's one we take every year anyway, so come along, I'm going to show you what we're going to do. And here we are. Well, so there we go. We've got our race fuel picked up. I love Renegade race fuel. I was using their RM109 product when we set that 970 personal best not too long ago. I went with a different product this time. It might not be what you expect for race fuel. We're going to get back to the shop. I'm going to show you what we chose and talk about why, so stay tuned. All right, so we're back at the shop and got everything unloaded. I'm going to show you what we went with, but first I want to tell you that I really have liked the Renegade RM109. If you're running a race fuel, take a look at that fuel. It did great in Orange Crush back in the day. I've been using it a long time. It did great in Go Man Go. And Renegade, they are the official sponsor or fuel sponsor for Challenger Fest. So they're actually giving back to the community. You've heard me say that before. I encourage you guys to support the businesses that support you. And for Challenger Fest there in Bowling Green, it works out really good. The Renegade facility, I don't know if they actually refine the fuel there or just package it or what, but there's a pretty good size facility from Renegade Race Fuel there in Bowling Green. So they're not only the official fuel of Challenger Fest, but they're also the official fuel of Beach Bend Raceway. So having said that, let's take a look at what we got. I'm gonna spin the can around so you can see it. Well, there you go. It's Pro E85. So I went with the Renegade Pro E85 race fuel, and you may say, well, why didn't you go with just pump E85? There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it's 85%, so when you'll get it from the pump, even if it's really E85, if you look at the little label on the gas pump, it may or may not be. It just depends on when you get it, what time of year, what they decided to do at the time. And I think the gas pumps around here actually say it can go all the way down to 51%, 54%. I'm doing it from memory. But even if it's E85, let's say we get the best case scenario and what comes out of the pump is really E85 when we test it. It still leaves 15% that is something else. So 85% ethanol, 15% something else. I've done a little bit of research. I've got a buddy that works in the oil and gas industry, and I've talked to him, and he said that there's no guarantee that that 15% is even gasoline. It's just put in, it's a couple of reasons I think. Number one, to keep people from drinking it, I think. But number two, it's to help the engines, the car engines, like those flex fuel vehicles that come from the factory. It's to give them a little bit of regular fuel or some kind of vaporization chemical is what they call it, to help the vehicle start easier when it's running E85. But again, no guarantee that 15% is actually gasoline. It could be, it's called refinery drippings was what I kept seeing on the internet when I Googled it. The Renegade race fuel, you're guaranteed that you're getting a high quality hydrocarbon as that extra 15%. And I think what they mean by high quality hydrocarbon is probably race gas. They probably put the 15%, it's probably some kind of race gas. And then the other 85% is a race quality ethanol. So you get true E85. Now they make a couple of versions. The one I got is straight E85. They also make an E98, if you want a little bit more. And they make an E112. The E112 is actually leaded. So if you want a higher octane rating, even than E85, you can go with their E112, but it is a leaded product. I'm gonna just use their E85. Only caveat to doing it in Go Man Go or in your Hellcat, you gotta make sure your fuel system is up for you. You've heard me say this before. One of the benefits of E85 is you get the cooling effect of the ethanol, plus you get the higher octane rating. Lots of benefits. There's more volume of fluid going into the engine, and that cools everything down, which is going to be really good for those piston rings that I talked about earlier. It keeps everything nice and cool, which is what you want. Your fuel system has to be up to the task. So you know we went with the dual fuel pump system, the drop-in system in Go Man Go, got that squared away. So Go Man Go's fuel system is 100% ready to go to run full E85. So that's what we're going to run for this race season. Be sure to stick around for that testing. We'll be getting to the track and testing it out. I've got some tune tweaks I've got to make. I'm going to work on my flex fuel tune a little bit, and ideally I'll be able to drive to Bowling Green or Beach Bend with 93 in the tank, get real close to Bowling Green, dump in a couple of gallons or 10 gallons of my Renegade E85, let the car pick that up on the way to the track, and I just roll on the track and start racing with the same tune I drive around on every day. So that's one option. The second thing I'm going to do is probably build a straight E85 tune for max effort. If I'm going to just go all out, I want to know the tune is right and it's made for E85. I'm going to probably do one of those too, really just to learn. You guys know I like to learn about how these cars work, and that's a good way to do it. I'm going to do it in the format of actually converting the car as if it came from the factory to run E85. It's a little bit more complex than there's a couple different ways you can do it, and that's the more complex way, but I do this to learn, and that's how I want to do it. I hope you enjoyed the content today. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Check us out on Instagram. It's at Speedy's_garage, as well as our website, www.speedysgarage.net, and hopefully I'll see you out there.